The race ended, but the FIA wasn't finished. What they confirmed after Miami shocked every single team: more penalties, more investigations, more changes, after everything already looked final. 9 sanctions. Multiple drivers hit. Results rewritten hours later. And here's what makes this unbelievable. Some of these penalties came from things nobody saw. A tire, just millimeters over a line. A car, just 2 millimeters outside the rules. A final lap, pushed just slightly too far. That's all it took. And if something that small can still change the result after the race is over, then right now, no driver on the grid is truly safe. At first, it didn't feel shocking. Cars crossed the line, drivers slowed down, and everything looked exactly the way you would expect after a race weekend. Positions locked in. Results on the screen. Teams already moving on. It felt finished. But it wasn't. Because while everyone believed Miami was over, the FIA was still working behind the scenes. Reviewing every lap. Rechecking every onboard. Analyzing every detail with more precision than anyone had during the race itself. And that's where everything begins to change. Because this wasn't just one extra penalty. This was a continuation. A second phase of the race that nobody could see. It started earlier than most people realize. Sprint qualifying already showed the first signs. Alex Albon thought he had done enough to move forward, until the FIA reviewed his lap and erased it for track limits, dropping him down the order after the session was already over. That was the first warning. But almost nobody understood what it meant. Because then came the sprint. Kimi Antonelli crossed the line in third. A huge result. A defining moment. And then, it disappeared. A penalty applied after the race dropped him to 6th. No fight. No reaction. No way to recover. And suddenly, something feels different. Because now, the finish line doesn't guarantee anything. It just marks the beginning of the review. But even that wasn't the real turning point. Because the moment that truly changed everything didn't happen on track. It happened in inspection. 2 millimeters. That's all it took. Hadjar's car, disqualified. Not because of something visible. Not because of something dramatic. But because it was just slightly outside the technical limits. And in that moment, the entire paddock understood something uncomfortable. You can execute perfectly. You can do everything right, and still lose everything later. And that realization started spreading. Quietly. But fast. Because if Miami is being controlled like this, then what comes next is even more extreme. And this is where everything truly explodes, because the main race looked calm. On the surface, nothing seemed out of place. Drivers crossed the line. Positions looked secure. The story of Miami felt complete. But it wasn't. Because while celebrations were happening, the FIA was still building a completely different version of that race. One review at a time. One detail at a time. One decision after another. Take Verstappen. No warning during the race. No visible mistake. Nothing that suggested a problem. He finishes, steps out of the car, everything looks settled. Until the FIA goes back, finds new angles, and sees something nobody caught live. A tire, just slightly over the pit exit line. Not aggressive. Not obvious. But enough. 5 seconds added, after the race. And suddenly, something invisible becomes real. But that wasn't even the biggest moment. Because then came the one that changed everything. Leclerc. Final lap. Pressure rising. Light rain making every corner unpredictable. He's fighting to hold position. Pushing beyond the limit. Crossing the line in 6th. It looks finished. It feels finished. But hours later, it isn't. The FIA reviews every corner of that final lap. Every track limit. Every inch of asphalt used. And then the decision comes. A drive-through penalty, converted into 20 seconds added to his race time. And just like that, he drops to 8th. Positions gone. Points lost. The race, rewritten. Now stop for a second. Because this is where the pattern becomes undeniable. This isn't one penalty. This isn't coincidence. This is a system. Because both of these decisions came after the race was already over. No warning. No chance to react. No way to recover. And that changes everything. Because during the race, drivers can adapt. They can fix mistakes. They can give positions back. But after the race, there is nothing. No control. No second chance. And that's where the real danger begins. Because now every driver understands something they didn't fully feel before. Crossing the finish line doesn't mean it's over. And this is where everything stops being surprising and starts becoming dangerous. Because once you step back and connect all of it, Miami doesn't look like chaos anymore. It looks like a system that never stops. Because it wasn't just Verstappen. It wasn't just Leclerc. It was everywhere. Qualifying changed after reviews. The sprint changed after penalties. The race changed after the finish. And even after all of that, it still wasn't over. Russell was still under investigation, meaning the final result was still not completely confirmed. Now think about that for a second. Even after the checkered flag? Even after penalties were already applied? The outcome was still open. That's not normal. That's something new. Because what the FIA is doing now isn't just enforcing rules. It's extending the race itself. Turning every Grand Prix into something that continues beyond the track. Because every detail is being captured. Every movement is being stored. Every action can be reviewed later, with more clarity than any driver has in the moment. And that creates a gap. A gap between what drivers feel and what the FIA later confirms. Because inside the car, everything happens too fast. You rely on instinct. You trust your judgment. You push to the absolute limit. But the FIA doesn't operate in that moment. They operate after it. With slow motion. With multiple angles. With precise data. Which means one thing. They will always see more than the driver can see. And when that happens, mistakes become inevitable. Not because drivers are careless, but because the system itself makes perfection in real time almost impossible. And that's where the real shift happens. Because now, drivers start to adapt. They hesitate. Just slightly. They leave a margin. Just a little. They avoid pushing that extra fraction, just in case. And those tiny changes start to cost time. A tenth here. A fraction there. Almost invisible at first. But over a lap, over a race, over a season, they add up. That's how performance disappears. Not through one big mistake, but through constant, invisible compromises. And this is why Miami matters so much. Because this wasn't just a race full of penalties. This was a demonstration. A message from the FIA. Everything will be checked. Everything will be measured. Everything will be judged. Even after the race is over. And if that's the reality now, then one conclusion becomes impossible to ignore. In this version of Formula One, you are not just racing your rivals. You are racing a system that never stops watching. And now we reach the point where everything truly changes, because this doesn't stay in Miami. This follows every team into every single race from this moment forward. Because once something like this happens, you can't ignore it. You can't go back to racing the same way. You can't pretend the finish line means what it used to mean. Think about the next race. Same drivers. Same pressure. Same need to push to the absolute limit. But now, with something new in their minds. That final lap from Leclerc. That invisible line from Verstappen. That disqualification over just 2 millimeters. Those moments don't disappear. They stay. And they change behavior. Because before Miami, the mindset was simple. Push everything. Use every inch. Find the limit, and live there. Now, that mindset is gone. Now it's different. Push, but be careful. Attack, but calculate. Defend, but leave space. And that balance is almost impossible to master. Because if you leave too much margin, you lose time. If you lose time, you lose positions. If you lose positions, you lose points. But if you push too far, Miami happens again. That's the trap. And every single team is now inside it. But here's where it becomes even more intense. Not all drivers will react the same way. Some will become cautious. Some will hesitate. Some will lose that instinct that makes the difference in the biggest moments. And others will try to adapt. Will try to operate at the limit without crossing it. And those drivers will define this new era. Because this is no longer just about speed. It's about precision under pressure. A system where every move is recorded. Every detail is stored. Every action can be judged later, with more clarity than you had in the moment. That's what Miami created. A second race. A hidden one. One that begins when the checkered flag falls. Where results are still alive. Still vulnerable. Still at risk. And that changes everything about Formula One. Because now, drivers are not just racing each other. They're racing uncertainty. They're racing a system that waits, and then decides. So what did the FIA really confirm after Miami? Not just more penalties. Not just stricter control. They confirmed something much bigger. That winning a race is no longer about crossing the line first. It's about surviving everything that comes after it. Because until that moment arrives, no result is final. No position is safe. And no driver is ever completely in control. And here's the final piece, the one that turns everything from Miami into something much bigger than just one chaotic weekend. Because what the FIA confirmed doesn't just affect one race. It changes how championships are decided. For years, Formula One had a clear ending. The checkered flag. That was the moment everything became real. Final. Locked. But now, that moment is gone. Because Miami proved something no driver can ignore anymore. The real finish line comes later. After the reviews. After the data is analyzed. After every angle has been checked. And that changes everything. Because now, it's not just about being the fastest on track. It's about being perfect, in a system where perfection is judged after the fact. Now imagine this. Final races of the season. 2 drivers fighting for the championship. Separated by just a few points. Everything comes down to one moment. One crosses the line ahead. Celebrates. Believes it's over. And then, hours later, a review. A penalty. A decision that changes everything. That scenario isn't impossible anymore. Miami made it real. And that's why this moment matters more than any penalty we've talked about. Because this isn't just about what happened. It's about what can happen, from now on. In every race. In every battle. In every championship fight. Because the FIA has shown something very clearly. The final word doesn't belong to the track. It belongs to the review. To the data. To the angles nobody sees in real time. And that creates a completely new kind of pressure. A pressure that doesn't end when the race ends. A tension that follows drivers into the garage, into the debrief, into the hours after everything seems finished. Waiting. Watching. Knowing that something could still change. And for the drivers, that's the hardest part. Because they're no longer just racing each other. They're racing uncertainty. A system that can take everything away, after they thought they had secured it. And that changes how you drive. How you defend. How you attack. How far you're willing to go when everything is on the line. Because now, the question isn't just, can you win? It's something much more uncomfortable. If you do win, will it still be yours later? And that is the real impact of what the FIA just confirmed after Miami. Not just more penalties. Not just more control. But a complete shift. The moment Formula One stopped being decided only on track. And started being decided after it. Because from this point forward, crossing the finish line isn't the end. It's just the beginning of the final judgment.